Hey there, Penn State football fans. I sure hope you enjoyed your bye week. I'm not sure Penn State's team and players had a lot of fun on their bye week, but we are back with the Blue White Breakdown podcast. We just heard from Terry Smith, but we have a special guest this week with Penn State set to play a very, very, very nasty Ohio State team in Columbus noon Saturday. We got from Cleveland.com columnist. I want to make sure I did a little background, Stephen. Columnist. It's Buckeye. He's the guy that runs their Buckeye Talk podcast. Also, Penn State fans, he is a Kent State Golden Flash. Oh, yeah. One of my favorite nicknames, I think, in all of college athletics. But we're gonna do a little talking about Penn State. We're gonna do a little talking about Ohio State. But Stephen, thank you so much for doing this. I was just going to say, welcome to the show. I have a couple questions for you, but I just wanted to tee you up and say, what's on your mind right now, Stephen?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's unfortunate that the on-field product of this game maybe isn't going to be what I think we all thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 days ago, let alone 6 months ago. Right, but it's still Ohio State, Penn State. There's still NFL players on both sides of the field. And so I do think there is something still for both teams to learn about themselves in this game. One team's trying to pick itself up off the bat a little bit, but the other one, it's like it's been a while since somebody's pushed them. And so I am almost hoping that even if it's just for a half, Penn State can maybe pull something out with 2 weeks to prepare where it's like, maybe it makes Ohio State bleed its own blood a little bit for the sake of learning a little bit of something about this team, because it's been really boring covering Ohio State. I know that hasn't been your testimony the first 7 weeks of the season, but that's been mine.
Stephen, this is where I have a lot to ask you about the Buckeyes, because look, man, I knew they were going to be good again this year, but they are. I keep looking up from my at the press box seat, whether I'm at Penn State or I'm on the road. And they're just manhandling people. Like, it's grown man stuff. New defensive coordinator. We got your old defensive coordinator. There are guys that are large, nasty, fast humans at, just about everywhere on the field for them. I want to ask you about them, but what I wanted to start with you, Stephen, was I know you were out in Las Vegas for Big Ten Media Days. Yeah. You made the trip out west, and I know you actually asked a great question of former Penn State coach James Franklin after he did his podium session for 14 minutes. You asked him about, I want to make sure I have it right, but you said, you think having Jim Knowles is going to help you learn some things about maybe how to deal with Ohio State. And he gave a great answer. I think it was about Drew Aller. But before I ask you about that, Stephen, did you hear James when he got to the podium where everyone just talked for like 12 minutes and there's no time to ask him a question? I was really, knowing him, stunned when he said this. He said, "This is my most complete team in terms of personnel and coaching." And I was stunned that he did that, because once you say that, there is only one expectation, and it better be a long, deep run this season. What definitely cannot happen is to lose to a 24-point underdog and then lose to a 21-point underdog at home. I know you know James a little bit. Were you surprised he did that? Because he doesn't usually do that.
Yeah, I was. I felt like it was unnecessary pressure to put on yourself in a situation where, when we got to Vegas, I think we all already knew the deal, right? It was, I mean, take us back 24 months ago. We're in Indianapolis, and Ryan Day is in that same position of, I brought back all these guys who probably should be on NFL rosters right now, made a couple of portal additions in key places. Like, we all know the deal here. We all understand it's national championship or bust. Like, you don't have to say those words in those positions, because we are literally going to say that for you. You're going to say it in the locker room with your team and on the practice. Everybody knows that already. But it did kind of feel like, in the way I've looked at James Franklin, I think the best and worst thing that's happened to him is Ohio State. because he's chasing it. He's chasing the Buckeyes. Like everything about this season and the preseason looked like what Michigan and Ohio State had spent the last 2 years doing, bringing guys back who should have went pro and winning a natty. And I understand that Michigan did it going undefeated, and Ohio State maybe fell a little bit, but even that part of it, you lose to Oregon, your season's not over. Ohio State lost to Oregon, their season was not over. They lost to Michigan, and their season was not over. And they were preaching that stuff. It's. I felt like James Franklin couldn't beat him, so he tried to join him. And the moment you started doing that, you start losing your own identity. Even the stealing Jim Knowles thing. I understand he's from Pennsylvania, but you didn't have a defense that needed Jim Knowles year one. You had a defense that needed Jim Knowles year three. And that's not what you were going to get. So maybe from an outsider perspective looking in, it just felt like they tried to be Ohio State. Yeah. And it failed. The same way that Ohio State keeps trying to be Michigan in the Michigan game, and it keeps failing.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Jim year one, year three, because as good as he has been at Oklahoma State, and then the last couple of years when he was at Ohio State, it did feel like, especially at Ohio State, that first year, there were some growing pains, and he is known as a guy that's, his defenses are incredible when everyone fully understands what they're doing, and you have the depth, and you have the right pieces, and the guys that are quick studies and all that stuff. But Penn State had some good defensive players coming back, but they were also going to lean on some depth players that were young and all that stuff. And James said it before he was fired. They were not playing fast enough on defense, and I was just, do you feel like that's kind of not symptomatic, but if it's a complicated defense and it's year one, there's going to be some bumpy spots, and the bumpy road has continued ever since. Really, they didn't play anyone in the non-conference schedule, so you couldn't tell. But Oregon had no problems, I think, with Penn State. They played very well in that game, and then it just kind of became apparent that there's really nothing Penn State can do to kind of change things unless Jim somehow can simplify things, because they have guys that just kind of really don't look like they know what they're doing.
Yeah. When I look at Penn State's defense, I see Ohio State 2022.
Yeah.
All over. And I mean that in both the most respectful way and also in the negatives of that, because Ohio State had a top 25 defense in 2022. But what does everybody remember? Donovan Edwards running through their defense for 75 yards and multiple touchdowns.
Yeah.
Lathan Ransom falling down against Georgia. The Penn State game where Parker Washington makes a simple catch that should have been maybe a 12-yard gain, and it ends up a 65-yard completion because they don't make the tackle, right? There are just things about Jim Knowles' defense where it works at Duke when you're building. It works at Oklahoma State when you're building. The only reason it worked at Ohio State was because they were building. Right, that was a bunch. That was Jack and JT and Tyleek and Denzel and Jordan Hancock. All those guys were in their second year in the program, and for a lot of those guys, their first year playing meaningful snaps. So he got the build. What we saw in 2024, when you could get down to the 1 yard line and still not score, that was the end result of things. And I felt like, looking at Penn State, you're kind of a mixture of those things where you got guys like up front with Denai Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant, where it's like, no, I'm trying to go. Let's get this. AJ Harris is, let's go. Then you got some young guys who are replacing guys like Abdul Carter, where it's like, hey, he doesn't need to be thinking. Just let that guy. I mean, how long have you been doing this, Bob? How many times have you heard a coach say the best thing for a player is when they don't have to think, they can just go?
Yeah. That's
and
it. Jim
Knowles' defense forces you to think. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's very obvious you don't know what you're doing.
Yes. And Penn State still does not know. It's been 7 games. They still do not know what they're doing. When you see, an Iowa quarterback who's really a tight end that played at FCS, he's 240. He cannot really throw the ball to save his life. Not that he has a lot of great options, but with the game on the line and he's going on it, he's going to run it, and he just goes on a quarterback draw. They missed one tackle, and I think he got inside the 5. When you see that, it's just not going to get much better. They also underestimated. They did not bring enough back on the defensive line or at linebacker in terms of from other programs. Their secondary is still very good, but they lose Tony Rojas, and there's just no one else to put out there to thank. If they hadn't have added Amari Campbell from North Carolina, who's been a good player, but he's wearing down because he's never coming off the field, they could be 1-6. And I'm talking about losing to some teams that were even worse. Yeah. But there's just nowhere. They're not ready to play. The linebackers are too light. The linemen are just, it's just a hard thing to do, to play defensive line for a guy like Jim Knowles, and they're trying to do too much. But I don't really see how. Terry Smith, bless him, says, it's my job to get it fixed. I just don't think he can get it fixed. Is where they're at, and I don't know when it will be fixed. I'm not so sure it will be fixed in 2026.
So I guess my question to you is, obviously Penn State's in the market for a new coach right now, and we'll see how that search goes. The way we're talking about Jim Knowles, is it almost better to keep him? Because regardless of what you're doing, you're starting from scratch. Or is there no way that Jim Knowles, you just have to kind of uproot it?
That is a fascinating question. I think what I would say is they would be more likely to keep him than the OC, Andy Kotelnicki. It just, there's been some head scratching decisions on the offensive side as well. But I think that Jim Knowles' track record speaks for itself. I just think this is, as you outlined, Stephen, he was the wrong guy. They were getting him at the wrong time. Yeah. And it's just, once you make that hire, that just kind of further puts the pressure on everyone in the program. They're paying him a lot of money. He's a really good defensive coordinator. He might be too smart for his own good, but you just can't have his defense ready to roll, after one off season, and with these kind of expectations. I just think there's been some miscalculations all the way around, and there's only so much a coach can do with the talent that he has, and I don't know. They are still the guys that they have coming back next year are young, but they're also light, and they're all they're Stephen. They built this team to play with a lead, kind of, and that I was always like, what happens if they're in a game and they got to stop the run in the fourth quarter? Because you could see, the Chaz Colemans, the defensive ends that are like 235, 240, the defensive tackles who have no experience, and they're light at linebacker in terms of playmakers. You're probably not going to win if you're not up by at least 10 in the fourth quarter against a good team. So I really don't know how soon this can get turned around, but I also know, I continue to marvel, Stephen, at Cignetti at Indiana, because he's doing it his own way. And I don't want to say recruiting doesn't matter to him, because he's just a great he knows talent, he can develop talent, he can coach talent, but he's kind of done it his way, and it's kind of it's been fun to watch him do this at a basketball school, and Penn State might need to find somebody who can kind of think like Cignetti, but I don't know if anyone else could do that.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting to hear you say that. Ohio State, Penn State's defense is maybe built to play with the league. Ohio State's defense is maybe built to control the game. And so it almost the thing we saw with Texas, because I get it, they won that game 14-7.
Yeah,
that game was controlled like it was 28-7. That's the thing. If you watch the football game, their defense is built in a way that it's going to tell the offense what it needs to do that day.
Yeah,
if the offense needs to be Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Julian Sand show, that's what it's going to be. If the offense needs to be, hey, this is the day to work on your run game because your defense is going to be getting stops, and then that's what they're going to do. And so far, it's worked. It's not about style points with Day in this era where you get 12 teams, and if Ohio State's not in the playoff, we're all wondering what the heck went wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So it's more about do what's necessary and control the game. And I think they've done that through 7 games. I think the interesting thing with Penn State is, as you mentioned, Cignetti, who's not really recruiting, right? No, he is. No. And I understand he's come out and said, listen, I don't want to live in the portal world. I would like to get to – I get it. First 2 years, you're just trying to handle roster turnover and get to where you're a stabilized program and recruit. But we're still talking about Indiana. Are we expecting Indiana to go get the number 17 player in the country? Probably not.
Yeah.
I guess with Penn State, I do feel like this is a bit of a And maybe this was going to be that anyway. I thought this would be a breaking point game for Penn State, regardless of what happened, right? This game was, at best, it was going to be number 1 versus number 2 because they both won their early season matchups and got to this game undefeated. At worst, maybe it's 8 versus 9 or something like that, depending on how everything shaked out. But it did feel like this game was going to be a bit of an inflection point for James Franklin and Penn State, and like maybe where it's supposed to be, where it fits in the landscape of the Big Ten. And this is some of the stuff we're going to be talking about this week on Buckeye Talk, but like, how should Penn State build itself, I guess, for a lack of a better, like, is the Cignetti model something that maybe is more realistic for Penn State? Is it the Ohio State model? Is it the Michigan model where you're a mixture? I'm almost trying to figure out where Penn State fits into this world where in the SEC you got Vanderbilt, who was all of a sudden a playoff contender. Up here you got Indiana, and it seems like Lincoln Riley's figuring some things out at USC.
Yep.
Where does Penn State fit into this world where I think right now we can all agree that it's Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana? Like, where does Penn State fit into that going forward?
Yeah, I just think this coaching search, there's obviously there's a bunch of names flying around. What Penn State needs is, James is the CEO, but he was, wound very tight. They need a guy. I think they need a coach, an offensive coach who can get what Penn State never has been able to do. And I was going to, it sounds they just cannot A, recruit, or B, develop wide receivers. It's just
crazy.
It is just like, it's bad. It is bad. And they take, the receivers they added. I did think the Pena kid was, if you look at his numbers, you knew he wasn't really a scary receiver. He was, a lot of his stuff at Syracuse was, almost like glorified runs or, stuff like that. The yards per catch were not. And that quarterback it's your old quarterback, I think it was, just looked his way all the time. Devontae Ross can run, but that's about all he can do. And then I saw the USC kid, Kyron Hudson, play against them last year. And, he's a big-bodied guy that can't separate. So, it's just – but Stephen, they've had really 3 receivers at Penn State since Franklin was here. Yeah. I don't think – it was really Bill O'Brien who got Chris Godwin here. He was originally, I think, a Billy O recruit, if my memory serves me. But other than KJ Hamler and even Jahan Dotson, who – I don't think UCLA even wanted him, and they just kind of got lucky. But he's not really he's a guy that was a dangerous player. He had a nice moment in the COVID year against Ohio State, but it's not really panning out for him at the NFL level either. They just can't. You can't win. I don't think you can really win if you don't scare the crap out of somebody on the outside, and you have a game plan to get him the ball, and you have a quarterback who can consistently find him. That's what Penn State needs, and I think everything else would fall into place. But it just has not been easy here at Penn State for James to do that. And it just looks like the wideout coaches, it's the same result no matter who they bring in. So that is the one thing that absolutely has to change. And whoever they bring in had better have a plan to get some quarterbacks here and to get some wideouts here, or they're never ever going to be able to keep pace or beat Ohio State.
And that's weird because James Franklin's a wide receivers coach. It would be like if Brian Day couldn't recruit quarterbacks. Going, how are you good at everything but the position you specialize in? So I guess that maybe this is a lead. Is Hartline a thing there? Like, should they call Brian Hartline, or is it? Being a good receivers coach enough?
I would absolutely call Brian. You know better than me. Is he being groomed to be one day? What do you think? My only thing is, does he really want to go to Penn State? And maybe he has eyes on some other stuff, but I would absolutely call him. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that the Hartline thing has always been intriguing because he's a very successful NFL player. So the idea of climbing the proverbial ladder isn't the same for him. I think James Laurinaitis is the same way, where they can Kirby Smart, Brent Venables this thing and stick around at Ohio State as long as they want and leave for the thing that they think is perfect versus just leaving for something for the sake of leaving for something to climb the ladder. And in fact, I think that's where coaching is today, right? Like Ryan Day was promoted to this job. Lincoln Riley got promoted to the Oklahoma job, right? the Urban Meyer, Nick Saban days of Urban had to go to Bowling Green and Utah and then Florida, and Nick Saban had to spend time at Michigan State and LSU. I think those days are kind of over with. Like, if you have a guy in your building that you know and you can trust, that's your guy, then you grab that guy up before the rest of the world can grab them up. I do think there has been a concerted effort this year that Brian Hartline is maybe ready to take the next step. I don't think that means, please, people listening, do not take that as Brian Hartline is going to be a head coach next year. But I just think there's a way he's conducting himself now that when you're a coordinator, when you're in the spotlight a little bit more, there's just, you can tell that I don't think we're near the finish line, given some of the guys he's got coming down the pipeline, but at least you know there is a finish line at Ohio State now versus maybe where it was 2 or 3 years ago, where it's like, I don't know, he's a former NFL player. He made a lot of money. He doesn't need the money. I'm just going to stick around at my alma mater forever. I think it's maybe changed a little bit now. I don't know if he's ready for that job. I get it, and it would be a splashy hire, but I am not sure. I've seen enough from him from an organizational standpoint. Like, he's running the offense, but he's running, like, it's Ryan Day's offense that he's running, and I don't know if he's knocked it out the park. He's been fine, but he hasn't knocked it out of the park in a way that I don't know if his next step after 1 year of calling plays at Ohio State is he should be the head coach at a program who should be no worse than the 4th best program in this conference. I don't know if he's there yet.
Right.
So it's the Jim Knowles thing where I think he would be the right guy just at the wrong time.
Yeah. But I mean, I just Pat Kraft's going to do. I mean, he's got to get this right. Like, this is his legacy now too. This is the guy. He came on board. James was here. James was winning 10 games a year and losing to Ohio State, but he was winning 10 games a year and they were going to a nice bowl game. But when you buy James out after a couple of games and you act quickly, I think you have a lot of time to get this right. You better get it right. If you don't get it right, you're not going to get a chance to pick another head coach. I think I believe it should be an offensive guy, charismatic guy that can sell the program. It would never be this guy, Steven, but one of the guys that I just think is sharp as hell is Lane Kiffin. He is, I just think, I saw him in the Peach Bowl against Penn State. He had Jackson Dart, but Abdul Carter almost killed Jackson Dart on like the first series of that game. And then the next thing you know, there's adjustments being made, and Jackson Dart, they could have scored 60 points on Penn State in that game. They called the dogs off. But I just think, he loses his starting quarterback early this year, and he brings some guy in off a guy that's obviously talented, but it looks like they're better with it looks like they're better with him than the guy that started the season. So to me, it's got to be somebody that's got to have all those qualities. You got to be able to sell the program. You got to unify the fan base. You have to believe that this guy is going to take the talent you have and be as good as he could possibly be with it. And that's who I think. And I think it's easier to get a defensive guy to coach your defense. I think in today's day and age, you got to have an offensive guy who can kind of really tie it all together. I'm not saying it's Lane Kiffin. I'm just saying he's a guy that I would absolutely call as well, just to pick his brains, because he's about as good as there is when it comes to offensive football.
And he can go to war with the other, dogs in the conference, right?
Yeah, he's not scared of anyone. He is not scared.
And I think that matters. That's why the charismatic part, I think that matters, right? Like,
it does.
Ryan Day has things on his resume where it's like, okay, I'm going to get this guy because I'm Ryan Day. Dan Lanning has those things. I think Kirk Cignetti is currently building those things. Lincoln Riley's defenses are always laughable, but he's going to always have a quarterback, right? It's what's I don't know if James Franklin ever had that thing of like everybody else move out the way because James Franklin got involved on the recruiting trail. Everybody else move out the way because James Franklin and Penn State are coming to town. You're definitely not beating them in this game. Even Sharon Moore, I don't think that's going necessarily well in year 2, but I mean, the offensive line and run game are fine. Yeah. Right. It's all the other things that you maybe have questions about when it comes to Michigan. And I think he bought himself some time because he beat Ohio State last year. But James never had a thing of like, this is what Penn State is. And if we beat you the Penn State way, there's nothing you can do about it. And Lane Kiffin's a great name. I think it should not be Brian Kelly. Do not go get Brian. Do not go get James Franklin of the South. Please. Do not do that. Please. But I
Yeah,
do think the charismatic part is you got to have someone who can just bring a little juice, because Penn State doesn't really have a lot of juice right
they
now.
don't. They don't, and I think Pat knows that, and he's gonna, and I think he knows this is a pretty important time for Penn State football, given what you just said, because Ohio State's not going anywhere as long as Nittany's and as long as Lanning's at Oregon with all those resources, man. You gotta. That's a lot. That's a lot of bodies to climb over to even have a shot to get into the postseason. So yeah, it's got to be. It has to be somebody like that. And if it's not, I don't know how much. I just don't think you can get this program to where it wants to go unless it's somebody like that. And I think that's why Pat has got to be very careful. He doesn't pick the wrong guy. There's a lot of smoke about his buddy Matt Rule, but I just don't know if that's really what Penn State needs. But that's me.
Yeah. Man, this is a different game.
It is. I wanted to ask you though. The Penn State fans are always curious about Ohio State, and I could just imagine them at the start of the year, Steven, saying, "We got the wideouts. Our whole offensive line that was playing very well is back.
Yeah.
Deny Dennis Sutton's back. We do have a good corner room. They do have a good corner room. We got a good schedule. We got to play Ohio State, but they just lost everybody.
Yeah.
It was a long year. I mean, there's just no and then as the season's unfolding, you're just watching Ohio State it just seems like they're getting a little bit better and a little bit better every week. The quarterback that they didn't know, that the kid that no one really knew about, looks like he's getting better and better. And they have guys on defense that look like they came out of a lab that I don't even remember if I ever heard their name last year. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking Penn State fans are like, what the hell, man? How did they do this? How do they almost look like they're better than they were during their stretch run when they were playing great football? How, Steven, is this possible? And who are these guys that I don't want to say they came out of nowhere, because I'm sure you knew about them, but I'm seeing these guys and I'm seeing the clips on social media of them just devastating people in one-on-one matchups. And I'm like, how is this possible?
Yeah, I guess let's start on the defensive end. It's because Ryan Day is Nick Saban reincarnated. I'm totally joking. It's. I think one thing about Ryan Day that maybe has been underappreciated until right now in this moment is we are living in this era of college football where kids are on different rosters every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Ohio State has yet to lose a transfer that they are missing, right?
Right.
If they want to keep you, they're keeping you. Because even Jamison Williams, he left because the room was crowded. And we're seeing what Jackson Smith-Njigba is doing in Seattle right now. That is the reason why Jamison Williams left. Because Jackson Smith-Njigba and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mecca Booker were coming down the pipeline, and he just wasn't going to have the opportunity. Joe Burrow leaving, I get it. Joe Burrow became awesome at LSU. You know who was pretty awesome the moment he won the job? Dwayne Haskins. Yeah. So they haven't lost the transfer. Even Kyle McCord, he ended up having a great career at Syracuse. I think he set the record for most passing yards in a season by an ACC quarterback, and that's fine and all. But Will Howard was, I think, what this team needed. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily from a talent standpoint. It was just, I asked somebody in the building a couple of months ago, if Kyle McCord was still here, would you guys have been able to pull yourself out of that loss after Michigan? And they were like, no, emphatically no. Yeah. They would not. And it's nothing against Kyle. It's just not his personality.
Yeah.
And those intangibles are all what Will Howard was, right? It's just the way Ryan Day has gone about roster retention, that is what you're seeing now. You are seeing, how many other schools have a Kenyatta Jackson who just okay, cool, I'll sign up to sit behind Jack and JT for 3 years, one of which I didn't think they'd still be here in 2024. I thought that would be my time. Caden Curry, Arvell Reese is we've been telling guys about Arvell Reese for 6 months, man. So welcome to the party about Arvell Reese. It's Carnell Tate could be wide receiver 1 anywhere else, and he was okay being wide receiver 3 last year. So it's what you're seeing right now is in this world of nobody can retain their roster, Ryan Day keeps retaining their roster, and then they get on the field. So what's going to happen next time? You can tell this next batch of recruits, hey, Caden Curry waited his turn, and now he's leading the Big Ten in sacks.
Yeah.
Hey, Arvell Reese waited his turn, and now he's probably going to be a top 10 draft pick. Jermaine Matthews waited his turn, then he picked off Arch Manning. I don't know if there's no way to really explain it other than that. This is the product of roster retention, and I mean, the way we talked about Knowles, right hire, wrong time, this was like the right hire at the right time with Matt Patricia and bringing in a guy whose background matched what the personnel was. While on offense, I mean, I'll let you know the next time Ohio State has a bad offense. I don't think that's going – like Julian Sand, he was the most talented quarterback in the room last year. He was just a true freshman. So none of this is shocking for us, but it is kind of amazing to see what roster retention can do for somebody in terms of everybody else seems to be coming back to the mean, and then there's Ohio State still living out on the edge. Yeah.
And it also, when Ohio State calls on a player, it's, hey, look, we wanted you here. Now you're here. Now we expect you to be the guy. It seems like they're all ready to be the guy, and that doesn't always happen at Penn State. That's another, I think, issue I think that they had this year. The guys that they were really feeling good about, they've just been okay. So I think some guys have taken significant steps back. Some big name players have just not. I don't know what has happened. Like Zane Durant has been a guy that I know what happened with Zane Durant, right? He doesn't have Abdul on one side and Nittany on the other. That's probably what happened.
Yeah,
to Zane Durant, if I had to guess. Yeah, so there were some pretty good veteran guys next to him, but now that they're just trying to handle him, it has not gone well for him. Nick Singleton, if this was a decathlon, I think Nick Singleton would probably be a guy that would be a standout. Yeah. But it's not a decathlon. He's more of an athlete, I think, than a football player. And he is just not. Katron Allen is just a pure runner, vision, power. He'll go through you. He can go around you. And Nick is just thinking too hard, and he looks lost out there. And it's unfortunate, but they just can't really. No matter what they say, they can't afford to play them. And I just think that somewhere along the line, this falls at the feet of James, because they had 4 years to get this guy coached up, so that when they were ready this year, he was going to be a weapon. And I think you saw last year, that the Penn State offensive line got good, but they also got the right teams to play at the end of last year. Yeah. And they also, I maintain it because he's doing it in the NFL, they just didn't really realize just how great Tyler Warren was as a player, a presence, and he could just do a lot of different things for them in a close game. They could have lost 3 or 4 games last year that he kind of had a large say in doing that. So all that stuff has just kind of come up, and it just felt like once Penn State flinched against Oregon in that game, they just lost their confidence, and James and the staff really, there was really no adjustments. And I just think that's why I don't know. I mean, when I look at the rest of their schedule, I mean, Michigan State's probably a game they should win. I don't know that I could say there's definitely another win for sure on the schedule for Penn State this year. And that's horrible to think that way, given what the expectations were, but that's how it's playing out.
They haven't won a Big Ten game since Maryland, November 30th.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone about that. It's an insane concept of we're going to be almost 30 days from their last. We're going to be almost 365 days from their last Big Ten win, and we're still looking at their schedule like, I don't know if they're going to get a win. Again, like, this is supposed to be a very different podcast, right? They're supposed to be.
I think Penn State fans want to hear from somebody who covers Ohio State. Yeah, and I have to think that everyone's going, what happened? What happened? They were pretty. I thought they had Notre Dame on the ropes in that semifinal game, and they were one play away from maybe going up 17. And credit the Notre Dame team and that coach Marcus. They got up off the deck and they made all the plays when they had to. But Penn State was this close to being. They really were very close to being in the national championship game, and they brought a lot of that talent back, and it's just been a face plant. And it's. I don't think there's going to be. I just don't know what. I don't know. There's not going to be a signature win this year. I don't think, and I don't know what Penn State fans are going to want to remember anything at all about this season.
No, it's a bunch of signature losses, and it's inflection points, right? You go back to when Ohio State lost to Michigan.
Yeah,
like that team was done, man. Players were done. They did not want anything to do. And I know there's Bill Rabinowitz put the book out, but this is stuff like we've kind of known in the background for players were done. They had a players only meeting with Ryan Day, and a lot of the players were cursing him out, and it was just not a healthy place for a while. And it had kind of reached a point where it was like, okay, depending on what happens in this playoff game, this might be it. They might need to, rip the Band-Aid off and call it a day. And now it's a cool story because they got off the mat and then they just ripped through everybody for a month and a half there. So it's fine. And I do think that's what James and Jim were trying to sell when that Oregon loss happened, of this is an inflection point.
Right.
And from this loss, we're either going to be closer than we've ever been and we're going to take that step. And then I think the next 5 years of the James Franklin era are going to be something that we've never seen before because they finally get it. They finally got out of their own way. Or I think it's going to break them. And it didn't break Ohio State, and it did break Penn State. And maybe that's a referendum of who they are as program leaders, right? Maybe it's the result of one that's just 12 years of buildup versus 6 years of buildup. Whatever it is, I think that's if you want to know the difference, if you're a Penn State fan, between the team you love and the team that you just can't seem to beat, it's that.
Yeah.
It's in that moment when – here we go again. We lost this game. It's the same thing all over again. One team took their minute and dealt with it, but then they got back off the mat. The other team, who quite frankly had more left to play for, right? Ohio State, it was now or never on December 21st on a cold day in Columbus. This is a September loss, man. You're fine. Two losses get you in the playoff, man. You're fine. But one team broke. It's it's a corny thing to say, but pressure bursts pipes, but it also makes diamonds. One bursted and one made a diamond out of it.
Yeah.
Well, more like a gold ring. But that's the difference. And I'm kind of rambling, but that's the difference between Penn State and Ohio State. If you're a Penn State fan, that's what you're missing. Is when that inflection point hits, your leader folded, and the team you're going to play on Saturday's leader didn't fold. And now I'm joking about putting his name with Nick Saban.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
What when you think about this Ohio State team and what is still is this team, if it continues to, do you see it as has it been a steady, a continuous development since the Texas game? And do you see with some of the personnel they have and some people that are determined to kind of become everyone's going to remember last year's team and the players who made those plays, but they're going to make their own names off this season if it goes the way it looks like it could go. Do you see this team legitimately by the end of the year, if they could stay healthy, as being a better version of last year's team? Is that possible, or is that not fair to do that?
No, it's fair because we're already doing it. I think, listen, we got to talk about something. This team's boring, man. I'm serious. This team is boring. They play football boring. We watched them put 4 tight ends on the field every week and still beat teams by 30. It's boring. Yeah. I think this team, there's kind of 2 parts to that. They're learning every week, and they're adding a new layer every single week. So it's going to be interesting to see what that layer is this week. They're trying to see what they can and can't do offensively, especially with some of the stuff. And so that's why Julian Sand threw it 42 times against Wisconsin. It's not because they wanted to run up the score against Wisconsin. They just wanted to see him do it.
Yeah.
They didn't play slow against – well, Texas was different. They didn't play slow against Washington because Washington did something so defensively that it shut them down. It's just they wanted to see if they could run the ball. That's it. They're working kinks. They're literally practicing on Saturdays right now because they're that darn good and can do that.
Right. In
terms of better, I think individually, I think last year is still going to be better. If you just named people in spots, I think I would take the defensive line of Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyler Williams versus this defensive line.
Yeah.
I think I would take last year's receivers where it's 3 bona fide first-round draft picks versus 2, and then we're not really sure with Brandon yet. Quarterback, that's not a conversation. I would even take last year's offensive line where you had 2 first-round draft picks and the Remington Award winner over this one. But I think as a collection of talent, last year's collection of talent was better. This year, the sum of its parts is better. It just seems to fit more seamlessly together where everything makes sense. What you're seeing Davis and Igbinosun do, that makes sense. What you're seeing Caleb Downs do, that makes sense. There were things sometimes that you saw Jack and JT doing where you're like, that doesn't look like it fits you. Everybody's doing things this year that makes sense, which is also why it's maximizing. So I think obviously Jeremiah Smith and Arvell and Caleb and Sonny are one thing, but I think 1 through 85 last year was better.
It's really it's impressive to kind of, I think, from afar, it's impressive to see a team be able to replicate a year. It's a different kind of year, right? Mm-hmm. Last year's year was, but just to be able to open against Texas, Penn State's opening against Villanova. You guys you open against Texas, and you guys, like you said, it could easily been a three touchdown win. But there's just a lot to be said for being tested and learning from something and getting better. And every time Penn State gets tested, they usually lose, and then they don't regroup unless you have Tyler Warren and Abdul Carter on your team. You don't bounce back. So that's unfortunate. But those guys were really really good. So I told you I wouldn't keep you long. We're already Stephen Means of Cleveland.com, Buckeye Talk, podcaster extraordinaire. We're already at 40 minutes. I apologize. Is there anything else you want to get to or anything else you want to bring up? Happy to do it, but otherwise, I know it's going to be a long year for you for the second straight year. And the last thing I wanted to do was this. We could stop it here. If there's anything else you want to get to, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I think the last thing was, and listen, like we do an hour and a half long podcast. I used to work with Doug Lesmerises, man. I'm not.
I know. Doug.
I guess the last thing I'm interested in terms of a Penn State perspective is just because Ethan Grunkelmeyer got one game and then they went into a bye week, and obviously this game has been built around the idea of Drew Aller versus Julian Sand, and that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
Like, what is he? And maybe he's not a threat, but like, what do you think the plan is to use him in this environment?
As Kinnick Stadium at night, like the configuration of the stadium and those fans, it's like Thunderdome because they're literally there's the field and then there's a guy like literally breathing down your neck on the sideline, just yelling his head off. He was remarkably composed. The noise didn't bother him. He's got maneuver. But we're talking about Iowa's defense, not Ohio State's.
Sure,
he can maneuver in the pocket. He freed up. He bought some time, but at the end of the day, these wideouts can. And Terry Smith is a Penn State guy. He played wideout at Penn State. He just calls it like he sees. Like, look, there's zero separation out there. There's just nothing. Don't look at the 93 yards and put it on the quarterback. They were squatting on everything after about the first series, and there was just nobody was getting open. And so I just think that Ethan has been dealt a bad hand. So I don't know what the best case is for him. I think if you're Penn State, you try and develop him, and you have to find out if we put a better support system around him, is he the guy? And I think ultimately he could be that guy, but they almost are definitely going to have to bring James Franklin refused to bring in any transfer quarterbacks. That was James's thing. I think they're going to have to bring in at least take a look at some other guys, because behind him, Jackson Smolik and the true freshman who's not really ready. They don't really have. They invested so much in Drew. They let Bo kind of go to Missouri because he wanted to play and he deserved to play. And now he's all busted up. But I think that Ethan is just I think Ethan could get discouraged very quickly in this game if they can't, and I don't think they can. They're determined to run the ball, right? They were able to run it against Iowa, but I just think that's not really maybe a thing that's going to happen, especially if you're going to put Nick Singleton out there against this defense. It's just going to be TFL. So I don't see a path to Penn State scoring, 13 points, unless, Iowa. I'm still not over Iowa and Kirk Ferentz building his career about conservative coaching and not taking a lot of risks and forcing the other team to beat you, sending a kicker out to kick a 66-yard field goal on the last play of the first half and having it swatted, blocked, and returned for a touchdown, and they almost lost the game. He's crying in the post-game press conference afterwards because he knew he blew it. But I just don't see a path to, if they don't do that, Iowa probably wins that game by 17 points. Mm-hmm. I don't know how Penn State gets 13 or more points in this game, so I just don't know. They're going to give up. Their run defense is not very good at all. So it's just going to be, is it going to be 27-6, or is it going to be like 44-6? I'm just not sure, because people are starting. It's only human for them to start getting discouraged. Yeah. And business decisions by the veterans and I could have played in the NFL. I came back here. We might be 4-8. What should I do? You know what I mean? I just think Ethan is in a rough spot, but he is a talented kid. The other thing, Steven, is I think Penn State needs to start recruiting quarterbacks differently.
You mean going after kids from Ohio that Ohio State doesn't work?
Huh. That's one, but also the two best quarterbacks I covered at Penn State by far they were winners, and they can impact the game with their legs. And in the fourth quarter, in a tight game, even if Penn State lost, they were Penn State's best offensive. They were the best player on Penn State's team. It was Trace, and it was Michael Robinson, and there's really no one else I would even come. Drew Allers is a gifted kid, but he is not them. And I think they got to look to get quarterbacks who could be more mobile and could impact the game in more than one way. And I don't think they do. I don't think they've been doing that lately, and I think it's a mistake.
That's all I got.
All right.
This was supposed to be a very different podcast, but obviously things have changed.
Yeah, we've been talking for 3 hours. I've ruined your Monday, so I look forward to seeing you guys out there. Yeah. Hopefully the weather's not too grim, but it is Columbus in November, so you get what you get. But I just want to, Steven, thank you so much for giving us now an hour of your time. You mentioned Doug. I'm actually going to podcast with him tomorrow.
Of course.
And I have a very different, I want to ask him some very specific questions because he's a Pennsylvania guy and he probably grew up. He's pretty familiar with Penn State. He's had some great takes on James Franklin over the years. So you're right. That'll probably be different with Doug. Doug is always different. So I just kind of ask him one question and get out of his way. And then I look at my watch and it's like we're about 18 minutes in, and then I try and ask him another question, and then we wrap the podcast.
Yeah, that sounds like Doug to me.
Steven Means, thanks so much. Cleveland.com. Good luck the rest of the way. I have a funny feeling you're going to be busy well into late January again. So I'm sure it's fun to do that, but it also the everyday part of that could be very challenging. I hope you're holding up well, because you're going to have to do it for a second consecutive year.
Yeah, this is the life I signed up for.
Yeah,
championship effort.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, thanks so much. I hope you guys enjoyed watching and listening to this. And as I said, Dangerous Doug Lamarice is up next to talk about Penn State and Ohio State. Looking forward to that. But Steven Means, thanks so much. I'll look forward to seeing you in the press box on Saturday.
Thanks, Bob.